Welcome everyone to our Vote 16 week 2 meeting of 4 weeks. So next week we have a break because of Remembrance Day in the West. Most of the schools have like a lot of the week off. And so instead of trying to negotiate all that stuff, we just thought we'll have a week pause, and it gives you time to get on the classroom, look at what people are saying and posting, write your own comments, do your own fancy stuff. And then we'll come back the week after. So we are week 2 of 4 with a little break in the middle. I want to welcome you all back. I was on the classroom and it looks like 5 of you guys have done postings from just this last week, and then there's lots of the welcome ones posted, so amazing. Great to see you guys online. I know Inukshuk, you're waiting for lunch, so thank you for joining us while you're all starving and waiting to eat the yummy pizza that we've ordered. So thank you for being patient. Everyone else from Vancouver, Ethan, I see you're joining us, all the way to Jamal in Nova Scotia, who is turned off his video because his audio is a little, and so we want to be able to hear him, so he's turning his video off. But from, I guess it's like 9 a.m. all the way to 2, 3 in the afternoon. We're so glad to have you here today. We have 2 wonderful guests along with the Senator's office, and if Senator joined, logs on, and would like to say hello at some point, we'd more than welcome to have her and introduce her again. But we have Cheryl Milne here and Sarah Austin, both from wonderful research and political and activist and advocacy and oriented groups that are here to tell you about the work that they're doing, and then answer your questions about what does the current research say, what does the current conversation and tenor in conversation, what are people talking about in Ottawa or Vancouver, and sort of how do we work together to have our voices heard. And these are both organizations that are looking to support youth and advocate for youth voice, and are here to help you understand what the conversations are like on a larger scale. Because sometimes when we're having these conversations in our school, we don't also know that they're resonating in both other places in the country, but that at larger levels that people are also engaging in this conversation and this work. And so I want to welcome both of them. I'll start by saying that I'm joining you today on Treaty 6 land, which is the traditional meeting grounds and territory and gathering place of the Nakota Sioux, Dene, Métis, all sorts of wonderful First Nations groups that mark these lands and their footprints walked here before me. In a spirit of reconciliation and land acknowledgement, we want to say that our conversations here are about sharing our knowledges, and whether that be in storytelling, whether that be in fact-based research or in audio or visual, or however we're representing our knowledges and our lived experiences, we want to hear all of your voices on this project. And that is our ongoing work in reconciliation, not just acknowledging the land that we're on, but also investing in what does that mean? What does it mean to hear all voices and to hear all perspectives, and to really look for the voices that aren't being heard. And so as you're having these conversations with us from week to week, think about whose voices aren't being included and how can I reach out to them so they are, and that we all have personal responsibility. It's my responsibility to try to get these schools, other schools involved and other voices on the project, but it's also your responsibilities in your classroom to know what other students are thinking and maybe bring those voices forward to these conversations if they can't come to our meetings. So we're working together in a constant action around reconciliation, and it's not just something that we tokenize, but it's a part of who we are and how we operate. Anyways, I wanted to welcome all of our schools. I don't know if we want to just do quick waves because we have a couple of pages here. And last week it took us like 20 minutes to do the intros because I always like to ask questions and be like, cool, tell me something interesting. And that always intro. We don't got 20 minutes. We got to get to what we want to talk about today. And so maybe if I see Newfoundland has joined us, there's a couple of kids at the back there. Do you guys want to wave? Hello, hello. And then we have our friend in Nova Scotia. I don't know, Jamal, if your other friends have joined us yet, but we know that you're there and we're waving to you. Nova Scotia. We have our friends in Westmount, Quebec. I don't know if they've logged on yet. Quebec, are you here? You could also unmute quickly and be like, hi, I'm here. And then Lisgar and Ottawa. Not quite here yet. Hello. And then Toronto, we have 2 schools, De La Salle and Bishop Strachan. who will be joining us today. And then of course, our friends at Inukshuk High School in Iqaluit. Have you guys gotten your pizza yet? It doesn't look like it. No pizza, but waves, lots of waves. Wonderful. And then we have our friends at Collège Saint-Jean in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And our friends here at the École Secondaire Sainte Marguerite de Youville in St. Albert, Alberta. And unfortunately, they're on a school break today. So they sent their apologies, but they're going to watch the recording of this video on the classroom and say hello to them as me in a few days. And then we have our Pincher Creek friends, Livingston. I saw them log in and they renamed themselves and everything. Crow's Nest Pass, they said. Hello, Crow's Nest Pass. There we go. Woohoo! Thank you for joining. And then we have our friends in Calgary, Peyton, and I think is Peyton. I see you, there you are. And then our friend in Chestermere, Alexia. Hello, Chestermere. Good Alberta representation. And then West Island College. Are you able to join us? Yay, West Island College. And then our friends in LVR in Nelson, BC. I know I saw Tamara. Yay, hello. Welcome. And then West Point Grey, Ethan, I know I saw you. Wonderful. Well, welcome from coast to coast to coast. Cheryl and Sarah, we have representation from at least 15 communities across Canada here today to listen to your knowledge and your sharing about the issues currently going on this topic in Canada. Now, Cheryl, I believe you're going to open it and give us some legal background and sort of set us up for today, and then Sarah will we'll turn it over to you, but even if it's conversational. So remember, anyone, I'm sure Cheryl will say this as well, but if you have questions, feel free to either use the raise your hand to maybe like, oh, I just have a quick question, interrupt or wave your hand or put it in the chat. There's lots of options. And I'm sure Cheryl and I will be interactive as well. So Cheryl, thank you so much. If you wanted to give your introduction, and we welcome you to our conversation today.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to hear or to see so many people from across the country. So this is really exciting for me. I run a constitutional rights center that's part of the Faculty of Law at the University of Toronto. And I teach law students how to do constitutional challenges. So I'm a lawyer and I practice law. I do a lot of work at appeal levels. So I appear at the Supreme Court of Canada relatively frequently. And we intervene in a lot of cases that involve constitutional rights. So one of the big projects we're working on right now is a challenge based on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to the federal voting legislation, so the Canada Elections Act, which says that you have to be 18 to vote. And so I'm working with law students, but we're working with a whole group of organizations and young people who are wanting to bring this challenge. And we start with, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of what the Charter does and how it has, what we think the arguments are, a little bit of the research that the students have done. And if you have any questions, just feel free to, raise your hand, interject. Whatever you like to do. At some point, because whenever I start talking on my computer, my cat comes along and because he thinks it's his time for his close-up. So if you have a cat walk across the screen, it's Mr. Pepperpaws. He usually joins me, but right now I think he's off having a nap, so it's good. So the right to vote comes under our charter, under Section 3 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And it says that everyone who is a citizen in Canada has the right to vote. It's not qualified by anything else other than citizenship. And there have been a number of court cases that have looked at sort of those qualifications. The most recent one was a case a couple of years ago where the Supreme Court of Canada said that there was an aspect of the Federal Elections Act that said that if you'd been outside of the country for more than 5 years, you couldn't vote in a federal election. And a couple of people challenged that on the basis of Section 3 of the Charter, saying that it infringed their rights. And the Supreme Court of Canada agreed and said that they couldn't disenfranchise, which means take the vote away from people who were citizens, even though they lived in another country. And the reason the Section 3 is really clear, and we have, the way our charter works is that you have these rights under the charter, but they can be limited. So they're not absolute. So it means that if there's a really good reason, and it's our section 1, which says that all of the rights are subject to such reasonable limits that are demonstrably justifiable. And this is the language in the section. That's why it sounds kind of legalistic and demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society, then the government can make that limit. And so they tried to argue that there was a reason for limiting voting for people who had been out of the country for longer than 5 years. They used to also not allow people in prisons to vote. And again, it was also challenged under the charter, and the court said that there was no reason. They couldn't really justify it. So what the court cases basically say is that in order for the government to limit it, including by age, any kind of limit, they really have to have a good reason and be able to show through evidence why they need to limit that right in that way, and particularly the voting right, because it's a really clear absolute right. And so the case that we want to argue is that they no longer have this justification to cut off voting for anyone under 18, because what we know now about the development of the adolescent brain, or as people grow, how they can make decisions like this. We know that the social science actually tells us that they make, a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, even a 14-year-old can make the same kind of decision on voting as somebody who is 25 or somebody who's 35. And that's because that's the kind of rational, thoughtful decision-making where you have time to think about it. Our brains are still developing through the teenage years, well into, for some people, up to 25, but mostly that has to do with kind of impulsive decisions that just in the moment. And a lot of that's based on experience, but it's also based on peer pressure. And so that those kinds of decisions are different, but the kinds of decisions where you have to think things through, weigh what you know, weigh the facts, those young people actually develop that capacity the same as adults by around 14, 15. So that reason, or that justification for cutting off the age at 18 isn't really supported by the evidence. There are other arguments that some people sometimes make. One is that young people don't pay taxes, which actually isn't true. If you have a part-time job or you work as a teenager, you're paying taxes. You pay taxes when you buy things. There's such thing as the HST or sales taxes in most provinces. So that aspect of a justification is also not true. And we also know that around the world, the voting age has been lowered in other countries, and the sky hasn't fallen in. Like, it's all fine. So Scotland has a lower voting age of 16. Wales just recently lowered their voting age to 16 as well. Austria has had the voting age at 16 for quite a few years now. Scotland's more recent, and Wales was just this past year. But even with Scotland, they've had now 2 rounds of voting that has shown that young people actually participate. And they continue to participate well into their 20s. A lot of the evidence shows that young people in their 20s often don't vote. And partly, there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, often when you're 20s, you're not living at home for the first time. You may be at university, so you're in a kind of a temporary place. And so you don't necessarily feel the same connection. You have other things going on in your life. But what they have found in some countries where they've lowered the voting age to 16, actually the people in their 20s continue to vote more. So there's actually increased and greater engagement of young people in democratic decisions. And I'm just going to say one more reason, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah, so then we can have more of a discussion afterwards. But one, other thing, that if you think that for some reason that young people shouldn't have the right to vote at younger ages, think about the kinds of issues that impact you and what you think about. So, if you wanted to have a say in something like, there's lots of things that even at the provincial level as well as at the federal level that really have a significant impact on young people, like education policy and legislation around schools, that's at the provincial level. Climate change, the policies around climate change, and the more young people are actually getting engaged in that issue, and there is some litigation, like some court cases about it as well, where young people have joined in. But voting is one way for you to actually have a say in those kinds of decisions that have a huge impact on young people. So when you start to think about the kinds of things you might want to have a say in, the idea of not being able to vote starts to resonate more for young people. And so this qualification of, well, young people don't really care, it's actually not true. A lot of young people really do care about these issues and would want to vote. So I'm going to leave it at that and turn it over to Sarah. I have a slide if you want, and I'll put it up later about the sort of decision-making capacity. I can show you that. Just kind of think about all of those issues. And if you have any questions about how the charter works or how litigation works, I'll answer those after Sarah's spoken. So over to you, Sarah.
Great to hear you share that, just the overview about the rights perspective. And, I'm really glad to be with all of you today. Greetings, I'm in Calgary, Alberta in Treaty 7 territory, and I've had the chance to live, work, and play in many of the cities that you folks are in across the country. So it's really a great pleasure to be with all of you this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm going to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing at Children First Canada. And for those of you who don't know our organization, we are a national child rights organization advocating for all 8 million children and youth in Canada. We really look at promoting the rights of children under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And our vision is to make Canada the best place in the world for kids to grow up. Many people tend to think of Canada as being a world-leading country for kids, but UNICEF's research shows that Canada currently ranks 30th out of 38 wealthy nations for children. So clearly we have a long way to go when it comes to protecting the rights of children. And when it comes to, like Cheryl was saying, the things that matter to young people like yourselves and your peers across the country, we have been hearing over the past 5 years that many young people are feeling deeply frustrated that the issues that matter to you are not making it onto the radar. When we hear about election campaigns, when we hear what's happening in Parliament, often the things that really matter to you are not getting the time and attention that they deserve. In many of the events that we've held in cities across the country and online consultations, young people continue to say, that if we've had this question, what would happen if kids could vote? What would actually, would the dynamic change? And that provoked us to really think about, how could a court challenge like the one that Cheryl has described really help to move the needle for all 8 million children and youth in our country? And so in partnership with Cheryl's organization and many others, we started a youth consultation earlier this year, and we worked to engage children and youth all across the country. We held a series of online consultations, so we held 4 online events, and then we also had a survey that happened in English and French, and really opening up this conversation about what would happen if kids could vote, and what does democracy mean, and what would really change if we were to lower the voting age in Canada. We had a total of 180 children and youth participate from all across the country. I'm going to just whiz through some of the results, but I'm going to make sure you all get an electronic copy of this, and as well as the full report, so you can see it if you're interested. But we had great participation from across the country. So obviously lots of folks in Ontario engaged, but representation from all the provinces and territories, which was great to hear. One of the things that we talked about in the consultations was, really what is this big idea of democracy, and what does that mean from a perspective of young people in particular? And what we heard was that young people see democracy as being something when your government listens to you and and listens to what people want before they make decisions. This idea that government doesn't just act on their own priorities, but really listens to the people. Young people also described it as having the chance to vote and being able to stand up for their rights. So what did we learn through the consultations? Well, first of all, the young people talked about this, there were 71%, so certainly a majority of young people felt that they were comfortable with lowering the voting age in Canada. And 16% were not comfortable with lowering the voting age, although of those 16%, some commented that they would be comfortable if certain changes were made, things like if there was more education in school about voting and democracy and our democratic systems. And some people just commented that that age shouldn't matter at all, period, that full stop, every Canadian citizen should have the right to vote. We also talked about, as Cheryl was describing, what are the things that really matter most to young people in our country? You are, whether you're 7 or 17, the things that matter in your life may be different than what matters to somebody who's over the age of 18. And so we wanted to understand what were the priorities that impacted young people. And 63% felt that politicians would be paying more attention to children and youth and the priorities that matter to you if young people had the right to vote. Here's one of the quotes. They said, lowering the voting age would mean that governments need to focus on the wants and needs of younger voters to gain their vote. Things like global warming, the cost of education, the diminishment of entry-level jobs are all special to young people. We also heard that some of the things that really matter, when we asked young people to rank, what are your top priorities? Some of the issues that emerged were climate change and the environment. Many young people describe this as the defining issue of your generation and don't feel like it's a high enough priority on our government. So perhaps that would change if young people were voting age. Mental health was another major issue, whether it's issues around suicide, addictions, anxiety, depression. Being able to access mental health supports when you need it and have that timely access was another high priority. Issues of equality, equity, and diversity were high priorities for young people. Many of you experience racism or witness it, and again, don't feel like our government is doing enough to address it. University tuition and being able to have an affordable access to higher education was again another high priority for young people. And the issue of reconciliation, the rights of First Nations, Métis, Inuit peoples in Canada, and how we promote reconciliation within Canada. We asked young people, why do they think that adults object to this? So, what is the big holding block? Why are adults making so many objections to this? 87% of youth said that it was because adults think that people under 18 are too immature. Cheryl's already debunked some of those myths, that clearly young people do have the cognitive, the mental capacity, intellectual capacity to make some of these decisions. But there's this big myth that adults have, and even young people may have, that young people are not capable of this. 74% of youth said that it's because adults think that young people aren't informed enough about being able to vote. But again, this is a big myth. Many of you are learning about these issues in your school and talking about this and more educated in some cases than your parents might be. We learned from in discussions with the Liberal Party, for instance, that they pay very close attention to what young people think because particularly during election time, young people come home from school. You're talking about this with your parents over the dinner table. And in many ways, that's helping to shape the decisions that parents make. But again, there's this myth that young people aren't informed and educated enough to make the vote. 56%, so over half of the youth who responded said that it was because adults were afraid that kids will just vote for who their parents vote for. But again, this is a big myth. Often when we see activities like student vote, some of your schools may participate in the student vote. Often the results of young people are very different from the votes of adults. And so again, this is a big myth that needs to be busted. And 6% of youth agreed with the criticism that adults have for why youth under 18 should not vote, and stated that youth under 18 aren't capable. So again, this confirms that young people often believe the same myths that adults do, that the young people are not capable of voting, when clearly there is research that shows that young people have that capacity.
Sarah, so when we talk, with that, if you go back to that slide you're just talking about, I'd love to, for people on the line now, to sort of maybe raise their hands around, or maybe hold up a finger. If you think, what do you think is the most challenging in terms of adults that you talk to? Do you think it's that adults think you're too immature, that they think you aren't informed enough, would be number 2, that you'll just vote for who your parents vote for is number 3, and then that you just aren't capable is number 4. So if you hold up your fingers of those 4 options that are there, what do you think is the biggest? I see lots of 1s. That sort of goes along with yours. I see a 3 though, a lot of 1s, some 2s. It's hard for me to see Jamal's fingers because his camera's off, but all right. And maybe in Anukshuk, can you just, I can't see because I can see all of you, but your fingers are too small. So maybe we could just have a tally from Patrick. What's the Or someone shout out, what's the most popular finger raise?
They're counting. They're counting.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's great to see your reactions, to see how, how this, how your opinions compare with your
He's
peers.
gonna unmute here.
So we have, was it 1 3, 2 1s, and 6 2s?
Oh, 2s are coming out as a strong second, yeah. I mean, it kind of aligns there with the percentages that you saw here as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, it does line up with what we saw. And I've just included here some of that.
Oh, and Newfoundland,
I'm counting up the fingers. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1s. 1, 2, 3, 4 2s, and 1 3.
Awesome. Thank you, Newfoundland. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the perspectives are really vary over the country, and something I forgot to mention was that the consultation started with very young people. I think the youngest participant was, 6 or 7, and the oldest were sort of 7 to 18. My son, who's 10, did not participate in the consultation, but partly because he actually doesn't care about these things. He thinks that this idea is crazy, and he doesn't think that young people should vote. But that's his opinion, and we've had lots of discussions at it over the dinner table. Young people have very diverse perspectives on this, but we did have some young people as young as 7 and 8 who really strongly felt that young people should be able to vote. So there's a diversity of views across the country, and I know I've shared some of the high-level results here, but there's lots more in a report that we'll make sure you get a copy of for those of you that are interested. When we asked young people why you should be able to vote, lots of people talked about the fact that you're capable. As young people, you have the ability to make these decisions. You're educated, you learn about these things in school, you can read about it on social media, you can make up your own minds. Some young people felt strongly that it's your right as a citizen. I mean, Cheryl described it. It's in the charter. Charter is the supreme law of Canada, and you're entitled to it under the charter, and it's as simple as that. Some people talked about it because it's your chance to have a say about your future. You're citizens and you're leaders, not only of the future, but you're also leaders today, and your opinions matter. Lots of young people talked about the fact that you're already engaged, you're socially active, whether you're staging protests in your schools or your communities, you're raising awareness online about issues that matter to you. Many of you are very socially active and already engaged and should have the opportunity to participate politically. And also young people talked about the fact that your perspectives as young people are unique. Yes, adults were kids once, but life as a child 40 years ago or even 20 years ago is vastly different than it is for young people today. And so your unique opinions, your expertise in your life really matters, and you should be able to have your own say about your life. So 3 main recommendations came out of the consultation. First, young people, there was consensus, at least amongst, well, not consensus, but the majority agreed that we should lower the voting age to 16. The second recommendation was to increase education for young people on political rights and responsibilities. That yes, some schools do lots of education, but that's not consistent across the country. These are issues of provincial jurisdiction, and so not every province has this firmly embedded in the educational system, and maybe not for all levels of education. So lots of opportunity for youth to learn more. And third, an opportunity to educate adults and to address the stigma and the myths that adults have that young people are not capable. So those are 3 things that came out of the consultations that we heard from your peers across the country. So we'd love to get your reaction to all of that and to hear what you have to say and hear your feedback. And so I wanted to mention, we did this with a number of organizations, with Cheryl's organization and with support of the federal government, and 2 youth organizations in Calgary and Halifax, Wisdom to Action and Youth Central. So we'll share all of this with you via email. And before I wrap up, and just so all of you know, we'd love to hear, and have you engage. We've got, there's an opportunity for young people right now to identify yourself. If you're interested in the court challenge that Cheryl mentioned, there's an opportunity for you to learn more and potentially be involved in the court case directly or play a supporting role. So we'll send you more information in case you're interested in being involved in the court case. We'd love to hear from you. Secondly, every month we host a Young Canadians Parliament with your peers across the country. It's a chance to come together and discuss these issues and have the chance to meet with parliamentarians Senator McFedrin has been a part of that, and we'd love to welcome all of you to join us. And lastly, coming up on November 20th is National Child Day, and it's a chance for you again to meet with your peers across the country and celebrate your rights and advocate for action. So we'll send you an invitation to that as well. So thanks so much, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback and your questions as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah and Cheryl. First, we'll see if I'm gonna
stop sharing here.
Yeah, perfect. It's always nice to look at each other. So does anyone have really some initial questions that they're dying to ask? I know that I have a few that are bubbling away in me, but how about any of our students? You can wave, you can come up closer to the computer if you're at another site, or you can let your tech teacher know that you'd like to talk. Any questions? Oh, we got one up in Inukshuk. Go ahead.
How come we're stopping at 16? How come we don't go like lower the age for voting? If you said like 13 and 14-year-olds can they're developed enough to make these decisions, why are we stopping at 16?
That's a great question. Cheryl, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can start because I know that a lot of young people kind of have decided that 16 is the age that they want to advocate for. But I want you to think about a couple of things, because I agree, why shouldn't it be younger? One thing to keep in mind is that all of the major federal provincial parties allow membership and voting in ridings at 14. So young people at this point in time could potentially, and in fact, in the last leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada, 14-year-olds were permitted to vote for who the new leader would be, who became then our official opposition, the leader of the official opposition. So those are really important roles that young people right now still can actually vote for.
Can I just ask if anyone knew? How many of you knew that you could have voted if you were a member of the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party for your party leadership? Well, there's no hands raised here.
Yeah, so that's one of the interesting things is that part of the court case is, they're going to ask, so what age should it be if it's not going to be 18? And I'm really tempted to say, it's up to the government to justify the age. If we put out the evidence that, you can vote at 14 and participate at 14, why shouldn't that be the age? I do know that young people right now who are advocating for legislation, and Senator McFedrin's legislation has it at 16. I know the Vote 16 group out in British Columbia have been advocating it for 16, and it's not to take away from that. I think most people think that's kind of the easiest sell. So that's why they're going there. I kind of with the group that says, well, why not younger?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, and certainly we heard from lots of young people who felt like, age is just a number. It feels really arbitrary. So, particularly some of the very young youth who participated, some of them, as I said, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 were feeling really strongly that age is really a bit of an arbitrary number. It should be up to young people to decide, if you're interested in voting. We don't rule adults out based on different capabilities that they have. Lots of adults opt out, or they spoil their ballots, or they vote for the Rhinoceros Party. I mean, so young people, if this matters to you, why not be able to vote? And so that's something that we're looking at with the court challenges, challenging it based on the charter, as Cheryl described, which protects the rights of all citizens. If you're a citizen in Canada, that's your ticket to voting, and leave it at that. But again, it will come down to the courts to decide that.
Nice. Any other thoughts from students on voting age in itself? Yes, Alexia.
I mean, I do agree that, is it cutting out or is it okay?
A little cutting out, but
okay.
You're good.
I do agree that voting age is just a number, but my thought is that when you're 16, you're old enough to drive yourself there. Technically you can drive, so you can get yourself there, and you're not relying on somebody to take you. And although no matter what age you are, you can get yourself there, I feel 16 is 18 is too old. 16 I think is a good number, because like I said, you can get yourself there, you could be on your own, versus if you're 10 and you're voting, although you do have that you could go vote, I feel like that's still really young and you don't have a lot of experience and like knowledge about it, even though you could learn about it. I just think that it's too young almost.
Awesome. Ethan, I saw you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is diverging, I guess, a bit from like the arbitrariness discussion. But I guess just one question I had, and I think you mentioned this a bit, was like relating to the court challenge. How does that sort of play in tandem with like this bill that we've also been talking about that's emerging in the Senate, and how those two, in two different areas of government, obviously the legislature and judicial, like work together to try to get this thing done?
So both things can go on at the same time. The getting something passed into legislation takes a lot of time, particularly if it starts in the Senate, because then it has to go all the way back to the House. And so it can take a very long time. For example, when we were involved in the case for the non-resident Canadians, what happened was that case got started when it was a Conservative government in power. And then the Liberals came in and said, so the case was still ongoing, and they said, we're going to change the legislation. We're going to eliminate that requirement. And so they ended up getting an adjournment of the case because they said they were going to do something, but then they didn't. And so the case then actually ended up being heard, and the court pronounced it as unconstitutional. So these things can happen at the same time, because sometimes legislation can always be changed, but the charter can't that easily. So, if you get the court saying that the legislation is unconstitutional, it kind of forces governments to then actually make sure the legislation complies. The other piece is that we can have legislation change at the federal level, but what happens to all the provinces? So unless you get a court saying this is what's constitutional, each province can do their own thing. So you can have the federal government, the age is 16, but then none of the other provinces want to change the age, and so it's only 18. And a lot of laws that really do seriously impact young people are at the provincial level. And it also affects like municipal elections and that sort of thing, because the provinces decide that. But if you have a pronouncement from the Supreme Court saying this is unconstitutional, then the provinces will have to get their act together too.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. And Ethan does it sort of wonderful. So Crow's Nest Past, I saw Mr. Taylor typing away there. They've put a question in the chat that is similarly related. And so they've been talking about federal jurisdiction. What about provincial or municipal? Are there any movements in those areas?
Yes, yes. I mean, I know the most active province, I think, is probably British Columbia in terms of the youth that are actively pursuing a lowering of the voting age. But there are other groups that have been advocating across Canada. It's just that that group has gotten a little more traction from politicians. But yes, there have been people from across the country, and the young people that we are working with who are going to be part of the court case come from across Canada. So we do have young people from Nova Scotia, we have people in Ontario, we have people in British Columbia. So we have from a number, and someone from Quebec. And we are still actively looking for more young people who might want to join, so that there's a group that are actually going to be the applicants in the case. We haven't filed it yet, and so we're still working on recruiting more young people who want to be part of the case.
Now, I know Erin has a question in Nova Scotia, but I just want to touch on that before I go to you, Erin. So what is involved? Like, we have a lot of really engaged, all these youth, most of them are doing it outside of their normal classroom hours. Like, this is a project, there's about 200 kids on the project altogether. And 20 of them are here today or more because of our classrooms. But for those who couldn't come, like, what is involved in that? How do they let you know that they'd be interesting? But then what are their responsibilities once they sort of reach out to you?
So there's a number of ways they could reach out. They could go through Sarah and reach out to Sarah at Children First. The Students' Commission of Canada is also helping us with the young people and sort of coordinating them. So if you if you get in touch with any of us, that Sarah, or me, we
We're
can
all working together, one way or the other.
we're working together. We ask the young people to fill out a little bit of an application form. It's just to let us know about you. And then we're reaching out. You don't necessarily have to be a named person in the application. There's lots of ways that young people can actually support those who are. But we just, in order to be an applicant, you have to be, someone who cares about the issue. You're okay with being publicly named as an applicant in the litigation, and we'll have more of a one-on-one conversation with you about what that means. You'll be working with a group. So we have Justice for Children and Youth is a legal clinic that's has been advocating and has done this kind of litigation over the years, and they're going to be named in the application along with a group of young people. But if you're part of the group of young people, you are going to be providing the instructions or the guidance to the lawyers who are doing the case. So, what position is taken and how we go about the case, you would be a client who then is helping to guide that. So you'd be very much involved in what's happening.
Awesome.
Carol, do you just want to also touch on parental support or family, like parent or guardian roles in that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we really recommend that you have your parents' support if you do this. It's not necessarily required, but it is usually better. One of the things that, because if your name is on it, it's going to become public. One of the things that, in order to file a court case, if you're under 18, and you have to be under 18 really to make this claim, because if you're 18, you can vote, so there's no claim. But if you, and I'm sorry, my cat has joined. That's the little sound.
A lot of opinion.
Here's Mr. Pepperpaws.
Oh, Pepperpaws is really into the youth vote.
Yes. So normally what you have to have is this thing called a litigation guardian, because they don't let people under 18 just file applications in a superior court. But we're trying to figure out ways to we're going to ask the court to issue an order that you don't need a litigation guardian. So that's one of our first moves, because we think this is an issue about young people wanting to make decisions for themselves. So why should they have to have an adult who is the one guiding the litigation when it's really about them? So we've got some ideas. The lawyers are kind of working on how we might do that so that we don't have to name somebody who's a grown-up in your life to be your litigation guardian. And that's just a legal term. We also have Justice for Children and Youth as a public interest organization. It's going to be part of it as well that can help. So that hopefully we'll be able to get over that hurdle.
Wonderful. Oh, Erin, you have been more than patient. I would love to invite you to ask your question now. Erin in Nova Scotia.
Hi, thank you. I just, in regards to lowering the voting age to having it being younger than 16 or even 13 or 14, I just, because obviously to develop opinions based on politics and how things run in our country, those sort of things don't just develop in a day or a week or a month. I mean, I understand that everybody's different, but for me, it took me years to fully grasp the concept of how our government might work, what opinions do I have when it comes to race, when it comes to, sexual orientation, when it comes to those sort of things. And so for 13 and 14-year-olds, if we were to lower the voting age to 13 or 14, they would need proper education, proper understanding to fully grasp, what is it that they are fighting for? What is it that they are going after? And what are the expectations of them? And so I guess my question is, for those who, if we're going to lower the voting age to 13 or 14, or if that would be on the card, would there be, for example, like programs created for students of a younger age that they take time so that they can fully understand what it is that they are fighting for, what it is that they're voting for, and to develop opinions and ideas that they might have, because this sort of knowledge, this sort of understanding doesn't develop overnight. I mean, college students, like people go to university for years to understand some of this stuff. So, is there a way to bring that into the life of a 13-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, Erin. I think, I mean, this is something that we heard in the youth consultations. Lots of young people, that was one of the recommendations, was there needs to be more education for young people in schools, and there needs to be more education for adults to understand what young people are capable of. But I think, I mean, maybe to be a bit of the devil's advocate here, you know, one thing that we also heard, particularly in the online discussions that we had with young people, was that we don't test adults on what they know. We just assume that adults have that knowledge, but we know, for instance, with people who have intellectual disabilities or who may be elderly and losing some of their mental capabilities, we don't take away their right to vote. That you retain your right to vote, and nothing sort of takes that. We don't take it away as you begin to lose your capabilities, or if you we just assume that they have that capability. And so perhaps we should extend that same assumption to young people, and allow young people to opt in and vote based on their own desire. And I mean, we don't, as I said earlier, adults can use their vote however they want. They can be as educated or as uneducated as they want to be. And often, you know, we know from research and from what we see even on social media that many adults are very ill-informed and often will waste their ballots, or vote for something like the Rhinoceros Party, which is not so that, maybe we should extend the same trust, if you will, in young people to use their capabilities and allow them to use it as they wish. I mean, Sherry, you probably want to add a little bit more, maybe from a legal
well,
side to that.
I would also add that just because you have a right to vote doesn't mean you have to vote. And so we don't have mandatory voting in Canada. So the young people who are engaged and who want to vote then could. And if you don't, and if you're not really informed and you don't care, you don't have to vote. No one's going to judge you. Like, it really is something that becomes an option. So I think that what will happen is young people who do care and who want to be informed and will inform themselves will be the ones wanting to vote. And I agree that we've been hearing from a lot of young people that they want to hear more information. And I think if young people can vote, the Elections Commission, as well as political parties, will make sure that they are helping to educate young people about voting and what their options are. So I think that that will come, because you can't ignore a group of people who are capable of voting, because you want them to vote for you. So I think it'll happen. And those things about getting more education about it will happen. But it's also, if you're not informed and you don't care, no one's going to make you vote. This will be an option. That's how a right works, as opposed to an obligation.
No, I think Mr. Pepperpaws there might shame some of us if we don't vote. I think he's judging me right now. So we've heard from some of our friends in Nova Scotia and Vancouver. Is there anyone in Winnipeg or Calgary who would like to ask a question? I want to make sure everyone has a chance, or Newfoundland. Does anyone there want to ask a question? Okay, or open it back up. And Nikshakai, anyone up there have any follow-up they'd like to have said? We are open and ready. So while you guys are thinking, I'm going to wait for a wave or a hands up. What I would like to remind you is that this is just one component of the project. So now we also have the online classroom, and I'm going to quickly share my screen. So this coming week, thank you for everyone who posted about different suffrage movements and what they thought about that. There's an awesome infographic from our friends up in Inukjukai, Penelope and Emma, I think it was. Awesome work. And all you who posted comments about the different movements. And we're trying to think about how that relates to changing the voting age for younger kids. What were the arguments there, and what was the process they went through, and what was the struggle, and how does that resonate with now? And this is what we're asking you guys to think about for this week. And there's a comic I've included from 1968 in the US, when they were lowering the voting age from 21 to 18 there. But they had already done, oh my gosh, what's that called when they make you go to war?
Well, in Canada, it's the conscription or the draft. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the word just left my brain. But so they had already forced people younger than that to go into battle, and so then they were lowering the voting age, and it was just a political comment about that. But what we're looking at is considering last week's conversation and this week's conversation with Cheryl and Sarah is what, and I've included videos to youth who talk about voting in the States and lowering the voting age. It's a series of videos, and you can look at the videos, or you can just think about your lived experiences and what your friends are talking about, what your families talk about, and pick one or two of these questions and write a small blog that talks about, you know, what are some of the ideas that most resonate with you around this issue? Are there particular topics that you would love that really make you want to vote? What are your biggest barriers to voting right now? I mean, we already raised our hands on the perceptions that adults have that prevent us maybe from voting, but what do you feel are your greatest barriers? Are they access? Is it, if you're under 16 right now, would it be getting to a polling station? Like, what are those things that are barriers? What in education would you need to see more of? I know some of you are a part of civics classes and law classes or debate teams, and that's how you've joined us today. But what are the barriers maybe in your school that are preventing you? As you know, at the end of this, we're going to come together and write a paper that we'll present to the senator as a part of her application to lower the voting age. And it's going to be written by you, and I'll help you write this, but it's your voice, and we need you to really think about these issues and provide this sort of basis for the paper on either pro or against, or maybe it'll be a bit of both of what we need in order to do this process, in order to lower the voting age, what you're thinking about, what your passions are, all of that. And so I really encourage you. So here are the questions, you find it on the Classroom. And then when you're ready and you're ready to post a blog, you just click on the write a blog and it'll take you right to where you post it. And now I've seen that some of you have already been practicing at this. Here's our last week's one. And we have Catherine and Tafara and other people have already been posting, Olivia. So it's great to see that you guys are starting to share your knowledge, but we really this is a meaty one. This week is a meaty one. So it's, you know, what are your thoughts on this? What are the barriers? Why do you want to do? Really, Sarah's presentation sort of outlines what we want you to comment on and participate in, and we are going to use that. So it's your voice that's important. My voice, it doesn't really matter. I'm an old guy. Or old gal, I should say. But we want your voice, we want your opinions, we want your thoughts on this. And it's critical that we get that information now. And here's your chance to let Cheryl, to let Sarah, to let Senator McPhedran know what your thoughts are on this issue and your particular lived experience about it. Like what you think about in Crow's Nest Pass is going to be different than what Calgary or what Ottawa or what Inuvik or Iqaluit thinks, right? And so we want your particular voice. Does that make sense? So get on that Classroom. If you don't have the link, tell your teacher you don't have the link, or send me a message here in the chat and I will get it to you. It's very important. Now I see our friend in Newfoundland is coming up close to the screen, which usually means someone has a comment or a question. So I'm gonna let them unmute. Oh, it's coming. It's coming. There we are.
Hi. I was wondering, because within this bill that would lower the voting age to 16, being a federal thing, and we've often discussed political education, and I think we all know that education is covered by the provinces. I would wonder how this bill would go about fixing education in a sense to help youth figure out where they stand on the political spectrum or how they would vote for a thing.
Happy to sort of jump in, and Sarah, you might have something to say, but I think that I kind of answered it earlier, but I'll just kind of elaborate a little bit. But I do think that for one, even though education is a provincial and territorial matter, that doesn't mean that the federal government doesn't have a role, and they often do actually provide opportunities for provinces to sort of educate students based on materials that they create. So there can be national curriculum that then provinces could adopt and teachers could use So, teachers have a lot, individual teachers have a lot of say in how they're going to teach civics courses, for example, what they're going to talk about. So I think the federal government could then create some of that material, but there's also a lot of organizations that will help with that. And I also think some of the political parties will see that it makes sense for them to also provide materials and make it available. And I also think that, for example, if the court case wins, and then it'll be a constitutional issue. And so even though the provinces might not want to change the law, they might have to. So they may have to get on board regardless. So if we go ahead with our litigation and are successful in arguing that it's unconstitutional, then everybody has to sort it out. And I think what goes along with that will be education.
It's kind of like that chicken and the egg, like which should come first, the education or the need for the education, right? Like they kind of are a circular thing where they fulfill each other's, yeah. All right, thank you so much, Newfoundland. That was awesome. Now remember, if you have any other questions, if you want, I'll get Sarah's presentation and some of their resources and we'll share them on the classroom in the resource section. We've come to the end of today's session. Remember, there's a break next week and then we're back the week after. I think it's the 16th. It's the Monday, same time, same channel, same me. But please get on the classroom in the meantime, post your thoughts. We want to hear what you think about this. What are your, this is the reason you can have a voice in this process. Senator McPhedran wants to give you the platform in which you are heard on this issue. And both Cheryl and Sarah today have let you know how important it is that we know that youth are advocating for their own process, their own change, that they're advocating that they need to be heard. And we want to give you the platform to do that. So we welcome all of your questions, your comments. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Cheryl and to Sarah for joining us today. It was wonderful to have you both. I'm sure that students can find you online if they want to find you on Twitter or if they want to find you in the world. Good old email. I know that I just cold called Sarah and she was there. So they're both very accessible and please reach out to them or to me with any questions. So thank you again, everyone. Calgary, Winnipeg, Alberta, Nunavut, BC, everyone for joining us today and have a wonderful week. It was wonderful speaking with all of you. Please get on the classroom.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good
day. Bye-bye.
See you later. Thank you again.
Hope you guys got your pizza.
Shawarma.
Shawarma, amazing. Love it.
All right, take care. Thanks.